Okay, what's going on, Vortex Nation? Today's sound is not brought to you by MC Ryan. He is out of the office right now, either deathly ill or on a CIA secret mission. One can never know with that guy.
I'd say B is probably more likely.
The latter. So instead, sound is brought to you by myself. This is Jimmy speaking on the mic, and so Ryan's going to have a lot of work to do in editing after this.
I have to say, Jim, I have to give my compliments to you because there's a lot of wires going on here, and actually watching you converse remotely with MC Ryan
Yeah,
to
let's
get
be
this,
honest, I FaceTimed this whole thing, so
it still worked out pretty darn good.
much appreciated.
Today's show brought to you by FaceTime.
FaceTime.
It makes me appreciate MC Ryan even more, though.
It does. We need him back. Okay, so guests on the show for today, we've got a few that have been here before. Ruben.
Yo.
We got Adam Maxwell.
What's up, guys?
And first time on this podcast, but not his first time on a podcast in general, we have Josh Tarrant.
What's up, guys?
How you doing, Josh?
Doing great.
Thanks
Happy to be here.
Good to have you here. Thanks for coming on. So, Josh, for those of you who aren't familiar, is going to introduce himself, actually. I'm not going to do it for him.
Great.
Why don't you go for it?
Yeah, my name is Josh Tarrant. I am a avid three-gun competitor. Spend a lot of my free time traveling all over the country, shooting as much as I possibly can. Have the great fortune of working with a lot of great companies. Anytime I can, I'm out there going pew-pew.
Rock on, man.
Tell them a little bit about, because I think this is interesting for people who come to our sport and think, it's kind of a redneck sport. How did you prelude your career in shooting as an athlete?
So kind of has to go way back a little bit. So we'll make it brief because I don't want to get too lengthy into this. But grew up traditional athlete, football, baseball, basketball, wrestling, yada yada. Went off to college and found road cycling. Got really big into road cycling and racing and did that at a very high level for a lot of years. Got to travel kind of all over the world doing that.
That's better than what a lot of people find at college.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah.
Also, I found my wife at college.
Which
Ruben.
camera do I look at?
Both.
Sticks with you for life.
Okay. Continue.
That feels like an editing moment, maybe. I don't know.
That might be.
So anyway, got to experience a lot of that, travel over the world, did a bunch of competing. I've always been a big competitor, love to compete, kind of just drives every part of me, I guess. So went through that, finished up in school, did the racing thing for about 8 or 9 years, retired from that, and then found the shooting sports. I've been a lifetime sportsman, been in the woods hunting, a little bit of shooting, but mostly on the hunting side. And about 5 years ago, I fell into the action shooting world. And luckily was introduced by someone I worked with who took me out to shoot my first match. And then from there, it's just been a ridiculous obsession.
Yeah?
Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah.
And I think that some of that obsession, maybe the why behind that, are a few of the things that you brought. We were trying to talk about what we talk about today on this podcast, and you had a few things on your list that seemed like all generally revolving around mostly kind of what keeps you in the game.
Yeah.
What keeps you going. You've been doing it, like you said, for about 5 years now, and we're coming up on spring 2019 once again. It feels like it's already around the corner. I mean, now that hunting is slowing down considerably, at least, it just feels like let's get on to the next thing. But yeah, why don't you go into some of those things? You talked about, just this sport being a feels like a family sport, some of the other things that keep you around, how you're staying sort of at the top of your game and continuing to improve.
Yeah, so I don't think I'm at the top of my game. I'm always striving to be better. So that I think one thing that keeps me super interested in this game is that there's no pinnacle. You can always go faster. You can always shoot faster. You can always miss less. So that constant drive to perfection, I think, is there for anyone kind of at the high end of this game, or someone who's starting into it and wants to get to a high end. Is there's so much runway, and the runway never runs out. It's a lifetime journey. I bet if you were to talk to Jerry today and say, have you achieved everything you ever wanted to? I'm sure he would say no. No, I want to do more. I want to be faster. I want to be better. And that's someone who's at the pinnacle of this game and everyone's heard about. So
Jerry Mitchell.
Sorry.
Absolutely familiar. You should look him up on YouTube and then you'll be familiar.
So I think that's definitely a motivating piece for me personally. Additionally, there's a very interesting saying in this game, and I hear it all the time, that the shooting gets you into the sport and the people keep you in it, keep you coming back, right? And people come in and out of things, hobbies, people have a shelf life for most hobbies, and they come in and out of things, and that's pretty normal. But what's different about this than any other activity or sport or hobby that I've been involved in is the people. So over the past 5 years, I've built this amazing network of people all over this country. I get to see them 2, 3, maybe 5 times a year, but it's like you're reuniting with family every time, which is super cool. You build these awesome relationships. I mean, these 2 guys here from Vortex, I love shooting with these guys every chance that I get. I look forward to it, but I got networks of people all over the place. The Burrows out in Utah, the people we shoot with in Texas. I mean, there's just amazing people all over the place. You just get so excited to see, walking stages. We were talking about this the other day. Like when you show up to a match, we try to show up a day early to walk stages and really get a lay of it. I end up burning half my stage walking time just saying hi to friends and just like you don't even get to see half the stages you want to see because you end up just chatting with all the people you're excited to see. So it's an interesting aspect and dynamic that I think is super unique to this.
So, yeah, I just show up 2 days early now.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. Yeah,
Scouting day takes a lot of focus.
It does.
Now, as we get to know more people, and it's hard because you want to talk to them, but also you want to scout your stages too.
Most of those people, they're not from your home state too, right?
No. I think I live in Ohio now. Moved there about 3 years ago, and I think there's maybe 3 or 4 3-gunners in the state that I know of that regularly travel outside of Ohio, and even the other 2 only go a couple of states away. I think I'm probably the only one that travels long ways. Like I'll go to Vegas or Texas or Utah, wherever. I mean, I'll go to wherever the big matches are, down to Georgia. So,
and your home state is?
It's in Ohio. Yep, just outside of Cleveland. So no, most of the people that I'm looking forward to see are many, many states, thousands of miles away, and you just get to come together and then kind of experience that match for that weekend. And you kind of build that awesome camaraderie for that weekend. Like you just went through this awesome event together. So
what's the deal? Okay, what's the deal with? Here's something that, from an outsider's perspective, doesn't always make sense. You guys are competing, right? You're competing against one another. You go to these matches where it takes a significant amount of time and energy and resources to go to this match. Why are you so friendly to one another? Shouldn't you hate each other?
yeah.
I mean, I'm actually being if some people who are super seriously competitive, who would put that much time, energy, and resources into going to an event like that in order to compete, would hate everybody else there.
You would think so, but this is, in my experience, this is probably the only sport where I think that there is very little to almost none of that. It just isn't part of the culture.
Do you think that's because everybody has a gun?
No. I actually think it's because of the
3
guns.
Excuse me, 3.
3 guns plus the backups in the car.
It's the demographic that we're drawn from. It's kind of it's kind of a rural. It's kind of like a lot of the motorsports, right? Like they come out of small towns where people are friendly, everybody knows each other. So I think it's kind of that, just the people that it attracts are people who are more looking to get along than they are to cut other people down. There are shooting sports that are like what you described.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the pistol games are very much like that. Like if a guy finds some little angle or something, they'll keep it to themselves. They'll not not walk over there, and there are kind of hush talking behind the scorecard thing like in football, in some of the pistol sports. But I think 3-gun is partially demographic, and then there's also knowing what to do and doing it are 2 different things too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It takes a lot of execution. Jim, you're like really like into the like motorsports stuff like that, right? And, like you can know exactly what you have to do on a track versus doing it. They're 2 completely different things. I think the shooting sports, like executing one sport with 1 gun is hard enough, and then adding in 2 to 3 other guns on the same, in the same 90 seconds, it can be a lot just to know what to do. But adding
so is it kind of like humbling?
Execution.
Is it humbling to a lot of people who go out there and they kind of realize maybe that I want to be competitive here, but I also have a lot to learn, so I'm not going to be a
I mean, you can be a great shooter.
Bag.
Yeah, you can be a great shooter with all 3 guns and go to a 3-gun match and just
Get destroyed.
lose your lunch.
Yeah.
Case in point, most cops.
Yeah.
Show up
When
to a
they-
3-gun match thinking they're going to pwn dudes, and they don't.
Yeah,
you know.
or even military. I mean, this game is specific enough. It's not that their individual skill sets are not relevant, especially they're probably incredibly relevant for what they do day in and day out.
Oh, yeah.
But this is a game, and it's different. I
Yeah.
mean, it's the skills do cross over, right? If he's got to lay down and take a hard rifle shot, high-end operator in the military has got no problem taking that shot. But it's all the other things. It's the movement to that shot, the movement after that shot, banning the guns, the transitions.
Shooting is
Yeah.
just a small part of it.
Small part
I
of
see
it.
what you're getting at now. At
Yeah.
first, Adam, I was like, "Whoa, man! I hope you don't get pulled over anytime soon. You might get a for sure ticket."
Hopefully, he doesn't get pulled over in Wyoming.
Yeah, but
Yeah, no kidding.
but anyway, no, I
Still
see what
got a
you're.
warrant out
I
there.
see what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely.
That's one
Unless
thing-
you actually do the sport,
Yeah.
you can have a lot of individual aspects, but once you tie it all together, it's all different.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on something there that even when I was watching some, videos, because I mean, this is definitely like I always say, man, this is your guys' world, not my world. But just you look at the footwork that goes into that, and it's just like it's pretty well. I mean, just to watch how fluid it is, and you can tell it's almost, it's like rehearsed in a way, right? But
Almost a
like it's like a
choreographed dance.
dynamic,
Yeah.
rehearsed, and I'm sure like as you guys are walking through a stage, that's one thing that you're thinking about is that footwork. I don't know. That's
I
one thing.
want other people to go faster too, so we can get through the day faster.
There's also that.
I mean, like,
Takes a tribe.
I'd be lying if I didn't say
Yeah.
I wanted things to keep moving.
What's so another one of the things that we were talking about before we got on here was some of the information sharing that goes around 3-gun. And that kind of also plays into the fact that so many people in 3-gun are willing to help each other out.
Yeah.
And actually be friendly to one another even at a match.
Yeah.
And that's something that you've done a ton of. So for those again listening who maybe aren't familiar with Josh Tarrant yet, you should go check him out. You've got Instagram account. That's the one that I know of because I see it very frequently. What else do you do? What else you got?
Pretty much Instagram and Facebook. I do have a YouTube channel, but I don't put a lot on it.
Yeah.
Just the sheer editing time to put stuff out that I think is YouTube quality is a little bit more than I have put the time into at this point.
Yeah.
Yep.
So why do you do it? And also too, for those again who maybe haven't watched it yet, I'd be curious to know what exactly you tend to put up there the most. But also then, why do you do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, to add on to that question, not to interrupt, but
No, yeah.
like what I'm fortunate enough here at Vortex to kind of work with the ambassadors, the people that represent Vortex on like the action shooting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Nick does the PRS, and Ian kind of handles the F class, the long range, and I kind of do the any of the pistol sports, 3-gun, multi-gun, whatever. And so I've always wondered, Josh, you've been in this like what, about 5 years?
Yep.
Where did you get to a point where you're like, I want to represent companies, not just go out and shoot? Like, I always wonder that when I get that sponsorship email.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're a very prevalent brand ambassador for a lot of companies, including Vortex. And so for me, it's like, I've always wondered, what is it that drives people to want to represent companies rather than just go do whatever you want with whatever you want?
Yep.
So there's a selfish and an unselfish answer to that. And just to be completely upfront, there's two pieces to it, and I'm just being honest, right?
Very well put.
Yeah, I mean there's an unselfish portion of it, which is not to reiterate myself, but also a selfish portion. So I'll go back to why I put information out. I'll go back to your question first. Actually, we'll go back to why I decided to do this and when I kind of thought about it, right? So when I came into the sport, and I've got a very addictive personality when it comes to activities and things like this. Like hobbies for me, I go all in. Like if it's golf, I'm at the range 10 times a week, hitting hundreds of golf balls, thousands of golf balls. I did that for like 4 years and found out that I hated it, so I got out of it. But so when I found this sport and realized that I really liked it, felt like I had a little bit of a knack for it, but more than anything, kind of a willingness to work really hard at it. My mind instantly came to like, how can I maximize on this opportunity, right? What will enable me to do as much of this as I possibly can? How can I just have as much opportunity land in my lap as I possibly can, right? So this is an expensive game. It's a very expensive game, right? So you're talking $300 to $400 per entry fee. If you're flying, you've got $400 to $600 on a flight. You've got hotels, you've got rental cars. I mean, all in, I think Dave Hartman on the show, I think they tallied up. It's probably between $1,500 and $2,500 per match.
Does that include weapons and everything? Ammo?
So I'm not even talking about buying the guns. This is once you have everything to play the game.
Okay.
This is just to go and shoot that match, right?
Okay.
Go to a major match.
Go to a major match. Locals, much cheaper, much less of an investment, but
Something you can do more often too.
much more often. Yep. I like to shoot major matches. I want to go out and shoot against the best. I want to see where I land. So my aspirations right out of the beginning was how do I take this as far as I possibly can? I suffer from this horrible dilemma of like delusions of grandeur, right? I instantly want to be the best in anything that I do, but it drives and motivates me. So I have this thought process. I had this pretty much after my first match, like, where's the ceiling, right? How do I get there?
That's kind of like Mark with goose hunting, like your band ratio this year.
Yeah, 100%.
100%.
100% banded geese this year.
Did you get in trouble when you clubbed that goose in the parking lot? When you saw the band on him?
All right, stop.
So anyway, as I'm trying to figure out strategically how I can possibly do this, and you look at the price tag of a major match, there's not a good way unless you make an absolute ton of money to be able to afford that. I shoot 15 to 18 major matches a year, and I knew I wanted to get there, and I didn't do that right off the bat. I started off shooting 1 or 2 my first year. I think I shot 4 or 5 the next year. So I had this desire, and I had to put a plan in place on how I was going to get there, right? And so at the time when I first got into this, it seemed about 20-25% of the shooters at even big matches were sponsored shooters. A lot of guys were still running around in T-shirts. There wasn't the perception of all this sponsorship being spread out. But I started paying attention to what these guys were doing, what separated them. There seemed to be kind of a common theme even early on. It was typically better shooters, guys who were performing well. And the ones that I aspired to be were the ones that were very friendly and were very, very outgoing to people. So Jay Carrillo was one of the first guys that I met, right? Phenomenal brand ambassador. He's a good, solid shooter, but he talks to everybody. He's very friendly. He's very giving with his information. Also, someone that I didn't meet personally, not for a couple of years, but someone who I found very quickly in social media was Jesse Tischhauser. And Jesse was someone who was very well sponsored, a very good shooter, and he was giving out information all the time. He was making videos on how to do this, how to do that, why you select this gear. And he was somebody that I looked up to. And I know he's a bit of a controversial figure for those inside the game. But
as a company, you want to jump on board with people who are doing that, right?
So I looked at what these guys were doing, and I looked at it and to understand why they were desirable. And for me, it was like, okay, what's the niche that I feel like that I can fill with what I think that I do to make myself desirable to these companies? I also looked at it right away from a business perspective, right? Any gear that's provided, anything that's paid for on my behalf, that is an investment in me to provide some type of return. It's not like, hey, thanks for the free stuff. We're probably never going to talk again. I'm just going to go shoot a bunch of matches. It's just my job to show up, right? I never had that perspective and that mentality. So I looked at everything with I need to provide 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 times the return on anything that I get and anything that I receive in sponsorship for these activities. And it's not just showing up to the match and shooting. So the niche that I really decided to step into, and I made the decision about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, was information, right? So I've gone enough at this point in my shooting career that I shot enough matches, I'd figured enough stuff out that I felt like I had some relevant information, especially to new shooters. People were brand new. Because you do this long enough, and Adam, you and I have talked about this before, that if you do something long enough, you forget about all the little details, all the things you just assume that you just do, that you just forget why you even do it. You've just done it for so long. I started to go back in my mind and think about what are all these things that were so new to me before that I've forgotten that I even had to learn, and then start to communicate those. Here's some super easy things that will just make your life so much easier.
Or you see it all the time where somebody who's been doing something for a long time, I'll just use our products for example, and they come up and they're like, dude, you cannot get anything but the razor. It's like literally nothing else will work. And it's like, okay, well, when you started, didn't you have like a Crossfire too? And didn't it work pretty good until you
I shot
realized this was something that you wanted to do and wanted to invest more money in, and then got a Strike Eagle?
I shot a 3-gun with a Viper PST 1-4 for the first 3 years that I shot.
Yeah.
It was like I saved up my dollars at the time, and like that was
a big hit for a scope back then.
Yeah.
Well,
That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And like it worked great.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to start with the most expensive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you see that even when I'm researching something that I haven't done before or don't know how to do, or it's new, and you start, looking for YouTube videos, and you'll find some guys that are experts, and they definitely do a good job of explaining something, but a lot of those finer points or the points that may seem elementary after you're into it. Like you said, you forgot that you had to learn it. You do it all the time, so you just gloss over it.
Yep.
And I'm watching this thing, I'm like, you missed, like, step A, B, and C. Like,
Yep.
I like step D. That's cool. That's actually where I'm trying to get.
Yeah.
You skipped over the part that I was watching to find out.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Some of it's nuanced stuff, but it's
Like in
super
the,
important.
Like in the rare occasion when you read the manual to something too, and the manual just like all of a sudden you're like, okay, the whole thing is disassembled. Step 1, put it all together, and you're like, oh, okay. What
Stuff comes with manuals?
That's the
yeah.
paper that you throw away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That nobody
That's what's in
reads.
That's just
Yeah.
packing paper, though, right?
Fire starter?
Moving on a tangent there, but yeah, keep going.
So it was an interesting dynamic because there was a lot of self-doubt in myself when I kind of made this decision. I had this like epiphany of where I felt like I could fit in this market and differentiate myself. Because to me, the whole thing was differentiation. If you're just one of 100, then why? Why would Vortex choose me if I was just like everybody else, right? So that became a really big thing for me. But there was a ton of self-doubt because for me personally, I was like, I wasn't at the point to where I was when I first started doing this, where I was a very big match winner. I was placing decently well for my 2.5 years in. I was, showing up to a lot of matches. I was starting to be someone that other people knew. But I certainly felt like my peers and above, I didn't have that level of respect with them because I wasn't quite there, right? And I think Ruben, you and I talked about this a couple of times, and some other people that I really went to with kind of this idea. And I finally dawned on me that I'm not doing it for my peers or people above me. It's, and I started to break down the math, right? And if we just make an assumption that there's 10,000 people that shoot 3-gun in this country, right? How many of those are big match shooters? Maybe maybe 2,000.
Yeah.
Maybe 2,000 shoot big matches. Of those 2,000 people, how many are like in that top percentage? It's like 60, 70 guys. So there's 8,000 plus people who probably won't or have not yet shot a major match that don't have a clue about all the stuff that you've learned, that all this information is relevant to. I'm not talking to those 80 or 90 guys that are kind of where I'm at or above. They could just keep on scrolling right past my channel, my information. It's not relevant to them. They either already know it, or if they want to bash on it and troll, then they can troll. But it's everybody else who has a desire, kind of where I was 1.5 years, 2 years ago, that I was really talking to. That was my audience and where I wanted to grow. As soon as I started doing that, my social media just blew up, got very, very big, very fast, with some strategy and how I did it. But then the return on that investment and that strategy and that tactic has very much paid for itself, both with, I'd say, my personal brand and recognition, but then also with companies who want to work with me. So,
and I think that's a good strategy to have for whether you be a brand ambassador in motorsports or hunting or fishing, or doesn't matter what you do. If you're striving to be a high level athlete or a professional at something, you have to understand that like you're catering to the people who like are not at your level, right?
Yeah.
The people above you,
Which sounds
like,
so elitist, to say, "Oh, I'm
Yeah.
communicating with these people who aren't at my level." Those same people are totally just like would kick your ass at just about anything. Another
Yeah.
thing.
Oh yeah.
Right. That's why, like, whenever we deal with people and talk with people about optics here, I'm always like, yeah, it's our day job to know optics. It's not this dude who's calling in about his to ask a question about his scope. It's not his day job to know everything about how that scope works.
And when I said that, like, I didn't mean to sound like that.
No, and I
but
didn't think that you were, but I was just clarifying for anybody who's listening.
Yeah,
absolutely. We're not trying to sound that way.
I think you have to also, you have to be realistic with yourself. Like, Josh, like, you work hard. You can see it on your social media. And for all the people who are trying to get to that same level as in shooting as you are, that's a pretty good example of what you have to do. So for me, as somebody who, helps kind of manage a team of shooters, like, I oftentimes point to people like yourself who are putting in that work. Whenever we hear like, hey, what do I have to do to be sponsored or to be a team member? It's like, well, you just got to work. Like, you don't necessarily have to have that level of skill. I mean, great example is like Sean Burrows came into the sport as a brand ambassador, not having the highest finishes at matches, but he's working and showing the story of improvement. And it doesn't matter if you're a hunter just getting into something. I think everyone can learn something from almost everyone.
yeah.
And even if you're a very high level shooter, I think you can learn a lot from people who are giving that instruction, because if you learn something one way, you might only do it that way. You might have never tried it another way. And looking at someone who did something differently than you can, oftentimes you can go back and evaluate your own method or your own style and figure out if that's something you should do. I don't know. I think everybody can learn from, no matter what level you're at. I can learn from the guy posting videos of reloading a pistol, because I don't practice that very much anymore.
Well, if you're looking to go down a path like this, step one isn't getting sponsored.
No,
That's not and I think that's, unfortunately, I think some folks, think that is, and partially because, like you said, it's a big investment, right? It's tough. So I mean, that financial component is a big thing to overcome, no doubt about it. But if you do want to go down this path, I mean, I'd say build a platform, right? Build that social platform. I mean, like you said, you have to be somewhat good and an opinion leader or an expert, in some regards.
Yep.
You don't have to be the best, and like you said, stand out.
Differentiation's key.
And then
huge.
provide value.
Yep. We were talking. I was talking with Josh about this, and he said that he was nervous to give me an answer on this exact question, because I asked him, at what point do you feel comfortable enough with what you know to tell other people to try and do it as well?
Yeah.
And he was saying, well, I'll let you say what you're saying. Go for it.
Yeah, I would say that I've had this conversation with Dave Hartman, the 3 Gun Show, a couple of times. Right? It's. I think people are leery to make a comment or a point in complete and absolutism, right? Because we all know there's more than one way to do something correctly. So if I just put my foot down and put a stake in the ground and say, this is the only way that you shoot this stage, and then someone else comes along behind you and shoots it a different way and does it better, you kind of look like a fool, right? So, so we tend to, and I tend to myself, say, in my experience with what I've seen and what I've done, this is how I recommend doing it because this is what's worked for me. But then I always like to qualify with things. I'm not the best. I'm not the greatest. And I think when you come across truly humble people, even Jerry Mitchell, for example, when I've asked Jerry for advice, he'd be like, well, I've found that this works really well. He won't say this is the only way to do it. And I think people that do speak in absolutes all the time and say this is the only way to do it, I think they're people to kind of watch out for personally.
And smaller personalities are a bit more relatable.
Yeah.
So in Josh's early days, I mean, people could relate to him better because he was, just starting out, and I'm not the best, but I think this is a good idea, and therefore, because people knew who he was, they would go and ask him a question. Where, not to pick on Jerry, but Jerry is just as approachable of a person in real life. Mm-hmm. I myself am intimidated to ask Jerry a question. Yeah. Other than do you want a soda?
Can I carry your bag, sir?
But it's all
people
just
because all the
smaller
posters that
people.
you have, though.
Right. We weren't going to talk about that.
On the
You
ceiling
promise.
above your bed.
He has me fake sign.
So, yeah. Well, yeah,
Can you get Jerry to sign this? Sure thing, pal.
We're picking on Adam's obsession for Jerry Mitchell here, but I do see you practicing Jerry's signature quite often. Anyway.
It's part of his
He
contract.
comes to the booth, and sometimes his hand gets tired. What can I say?
It's going to become a really good side hustle for you on eBay, those signed Jerry posters.
You're not
Jerry, I'm sorry. It was all in good intention.
Hashtag fake news.
Man, this really went. One of the things,
larceny, straight larceny. No.
One of the other things that you mentioned though, Josh, before was you said that Dave on the 3 Gun Show hates it when you say that.
He does
because he wants people, because he knows, and I'm sure that if all of us look back when we were trying to learn something, we would agree with this too. We all looked for it as well. But he knows a lot of his listeners are looking for an absolute. I don't want to know
foolproof.
Yeah, foolproof. I don't want to know that there's other ways to do it. This is just one of them. I want to know the way.
Yep.
And so he knows a lot. That's what a lot of people are looking for because it's helpful to them. If that did exist, it would be extremely helpful to just know this is it. And then also too, though, in Dave's mind, he knows as kind of a marketing guy, probably a little bit, or the marketing side of his brain, that whenever somebody starts talking about absolutism, that's some potential controversy, which equals more listens and more people getting involved and
as
also
long as they're
engaging
fighting in our
arguing.
yard.
Yeah.
Right. So in the essence of that, I will communicate an absolute that I believe. Bullets on your pistol in the magazine, point forward. If you're not putting them forward, you're doing it the wrong way. Maybe out if you got one of those weird caddies that point them out, but backwards is the wrong way to go.
It's the wrong way to do it.
Wrong way to do it.
So
Absolute.
There you go.
I made an
Funny
absolutism.
story. It's
there's
harder
one.
to convince people
Learn
of
something
that.
every
than
day.
you might
Very
think.
hard. Very hard to convince people.
There's
I'm,
one.
I'm fortunate enough I get to do a little bit of instruction. Some of it's with my cord. Mark, come on.
Got you on lockdown. Got you on a short leash.
Some I get to do some instruction. Some with local people that are looking to get into 3-gun. I've been fortunate enough to kind of to get to help run the 3-gun around the local area here in South Central Wisconsin, and then some of it's with some of our coworkers here who are looking to get into shooting. And one thing I will do is I think sometimes the absolute can be used in the right way. So I'll tell somebody when they're learning how to reload a pistol or learning how to shoulder a rifle, I'll tell them, all right, try it this way. You know, I don't tell them like, hey, just put it however it feels good, right? I'll tell them a few different methods, and then I'll just say, figure out which one of those works well for you, and then that's the way you should do it. Because I think, like you said, Dave has a lot of people who are looking for that direction. They're looking to learn. They're looking for an instruction manual on how to do things. And so I'll tell people, like, I think this works the best.
Yeah.
That being said, it might not work the best for you.
I'll be the first to admit too that I've done it. I do think it can be used, like you said, in a good way. Because let's say somebody asks for a scope recommendation.
Yeah.
I've had people come up and let's say, hey, I want to shoot coyotes. This whole scope stuff is super overwhelming. I don't understand any of it. All I want to do is put a good scope on my gun, my AR. It's going to be able to shoot some coyotes.
Well,
Like,
So you're
somebody
asking for
could
my
say,
opinion.
Somebody could say, well, you could go with a 1 to 6, and then that's going to be pretty sweet. You could go with a 2 to 10. You could go with a 3 to 15. There's a PST Gen 2. It's got an illuminated reticle. There's also the Viper H. You know, it's like
Yeah.
you could go into all these things.
You could spend hours.
There's been so many times where I've just been like, Viper HS 2.5 to 10 by 44. You'll love it. Oh, you're hunting at night? Okay, PST 2 to 10, first focal plane, illuminated reticle. Good.
Yeah.
And it's like, in
That's all
those
they want.
cases, that person, like, boom, great. They get it. They love it.
But you know it's going to work too, though. Like
Yeah,
you know from personal experience or from talking to people that that's going to work.
Right.
From there, we can build off of that. But
Right.
like, it's going to work.
Well, and that person who's like asking for like kind of that level of information, they're not at those, upper tier of knowledge or experience. They're looking for something to get. They might come back in a year and need some, have some additional questions or, want to fine tune, or maybe they have a new application.
Yeah.
But like you said, for what they're doing, what they need right there, it's going to do everything they need them to do.
Because maybe sometimes, too, once you tell them to do something and they do it, well, then now they've gotten some experience and some knowledge behind the subject, too, to where the next time they go back, they're like, okay, I tried that. But now, now I kind of understand how this works. Okay, I get that, 2 to 10 means it's 2 to 10 power.
Yep.
I see what's going on here. I
maybe-
kind of like that illumination thing. So now they start knowing a little bit more, and then you can be like, oh, okay, well, for your next one, there's these options,
Yeah.
But at least they've tried
Yeah,
something.
like Mark, what optic do you have in your AR for coyote hunting?
Oh, yeah. What about the door kicking one, too?
It's a true ghost gun. It doesn't exist yet.
Hey, I told you I was going to bring it up every time until you.
That's right. That's a good one.
We're gonna get there.
So, I'll ask this too, and Josh / Rube, you guys chime in on this one. We brought up how bringing up absolutes can be controversial. We mentioned another person individually who's had some controversy around them, whatever it is. And again, I kind of go back to how we gave, and of course we're picking on Dave and we're like potentially putting words in his mouth where we were saying, a little controversy on your platform isn't always that bad because it's people talking, right?
I don't think it's bad on anybody's platform, right? I mean,
yeah,
at some point it draws some attention.
Exactly. So controversy, at what level is it from a brand ambassador and also from somebody who's managing a team of brand ambassadors? At what level is controversy kind of like, okay, this is actually like it could be a good thing, right? We have people talking, we have maybe valid opinions being voiced, and then what point is it kind of like, okay, this is like this should stop immediately?
I've got a good answer, but go ahead, Rube, if you got something.
I'm thinking O.J. Simpson killed the Ford Bronco. It's coming back.
It is.
But he killed it, right? But then also,
That's not all.
Elon Musk, he came out with a flamethrower that he told people not to buy and they bought it.
Sold them out.
Yeah.
Sold 'em
So
out.
I guess from
So
that,
there's some controversy there, both sides.
I guess as long as our brand ambassadors are keeping in mind the core values of Vortex, what we're founded on, what we believe, being about the customer, being willing to get to shovel snow, right? Like having that servant mentality. As long as they're doing that, and morally, we're not crossing anything that goes against the company, our beliefs, and being decent human beings.
Or laws.
Yeah, as long as we're being legally in compliance with local and state and federal regulations and guidelines.
Please sign here, sir.
I mean, like, to me, as long everybody's entitled to have an opinion, I'm not going to tell somebody what they should think.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to say on their social platform that this way of loading a shotgun is dumb and everybody else that does it like sucks, like, well, you better be able to do it really good, or I'm going to call you and be like, hey, what do you think about that? You think that was smart to post that?
Or could you maybe not tell like 80% of the three-gun world that they all suck? Apparently,
Yeah, no, I mean, like, you get what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah, no, I
everybody's
hear ya.
entitled to an opinion. Jesse Tischhauser used to post stuff all the time, and then people would be like, "Yeah, well, Jesse, he's such a rebel," and then they find out later that, maybe he wasn't 100% right, but he was kind of right, and we were all just a little bit wrong. I don't know. I think controversy is one of those things that, I mean, I don't want to say dealt with it, but like I've definitely encountered it with brand ambassadors, and and sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's like, hey, they realize later it's probably not something they're going to post again. But as long as we're not getting outside of those guidelines that I kind of said, I mean, you do you.
What's it like from your side of the spectrum, Josh? So like when you think of something that you could put out there, and you kind of everybody knows usually when you're about to post something or you're about to say something, you're like, I'm gonna piss some people off here.
Yeah.
What's that like for you?
Glock versus
What goes through your head?
So yeah, I mean, the instant that so going back to like being a brand ambassador, like I shoot for I think 13 different companies. I represent different companies. I think Vortex is probably one of the largest companies that I shoot for, down to some very small organizations that are kind of grassroots. So the way I personally view it is that I work for these companies, every one of them. I consider myself an employee. I'm invested in their success, and I'm associated with that company. So things that I do well represents well in that company by default. And I know how I look at people and other brand ambassadors when they don't do, and they've got bad attitudes and they're not good people and they do bad things. It reflects, I look directly at who do they support. I'm not buying that product. I personally make those decisions. I see who they shoot for, and I see their attitude, and it instantly reflects on a buying decision for me. So I think about that a lot. So from my perspective, I have to think about that every time I want to do something or say something, and it's probably one of the reasons why I try not to be super absolutist about a lot of things. But I have been caught off guard by doing things that I thought were very inconsequential and turned out to be incredibly controversial, and been smack dab in the middle of it and been like in the storm and don't know how that even happened.
Do you feel that a lot of people were praying for you during that time?
A lot of pray for Josh.
Hashtag pray for Josh.
Yeah, there's a tank top out there somewhere.
Do we want to leave this off this podcast, or is this like
It's fine.
way public already?
It's
No, it's
way
way public.
public.
What'd you do?
Okay. Hey, Jim, thanks for asking. you actually did ask for a friend.
It's actually kind of
pick
funny
that
that you
scab
brought
for
up
you.
the controversial thing with me.
I'm asking for a friend, and
Asking for a
probably a
friend.
lot of listeners.
So I made a comment on social media that I thought that female shooters were every bit as capable of performing in the shooting sports on par with men.
Like you drive a train.
That kind of engineer.
Love trains.
On a track.
On a track.
Choo choo.
Choo choo. So yeah, that was the whole pray for Josh thing. So
Sweet.
at some point it blew up pretty good.
Right where you said that. So yeah, I think just in case we basically cut that whole thing out later on in editing, welcome back.
Yeah.
And we had a little sidebar there, but at least I think we might cut it off after people just kind of get a hint. If you want to know more,
Yeah.
it sounds like you can pretty much go to Facebook or
Oh yeah.
It's out there.
probably
yeah,
Google
it's
this
still out
guy
there.
in.
It's out
So-
there.
Just search hashtag pray for Josh.
We'll
Perfect.
The
We'll
embers
provide
are still
We'll
warm.
provide
Yep.
links in the show notes.
There we
so,
go.
So back to the basic controversy Enunciation. Gosh, I can't speak. Back to the topic of controversy. I think as a brand ambassador representing a lot of companies, I think one of the worst things brand ambassadors can do is to attempt to promote their product by bashing others. I think that's the mortal sin of representing, of being a company and also representing a company. It's the worst way to do it.
Yeah.
I've tried really hard not to get into that pitfall. You do slip from time to time, and there's a handful of products out there that are super easy to just be like, don't buy that product, it's terrible. But I think you do so much better by promoting the positive aspects of products versus trying to rip everyone else down.
And in regards to like sponsored athletes saying things, you were mentioning like certain products you won't buy because of who they have affiliated with them, and like I've actually done that as well. And it's never because somebody swore or because somebody, did something accidentally, or it's always when they're like talking down to someone or showing arrogance or like, bashing someone or not willing to help a new shooter or something like that.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things that get me going.
Yeah.
What have you ever had, or have you ever had to have any considerations when you said you represent 13 companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
All those 13 companies are going to have their individual values. They're going to have their individual way that they want people to portray their business and their company and stuff like that. Obviously, I can tell you, Ruben mentioned some of the ones that we look for at Vortex. Have you ever had where those things don't align? Let's say company 3 and company 9. They don't really, there's like it would be difficult to have that match up, where I have to act one way. Company 3 is going to like that. Company 9 is going to hate that. Vice versa. Does that ever happen with you, or is that almost something?
No, and I would say anything that was that drastic, then you got to take a step internally and think about how does this compare to your own moral set, right? I think in order for it to be that drastic for company A to have that much of a different perspective from company B and how you should behave and act, then you probably need to step back and look internally and say, like, how do I want to be portrayed just personally? Like, regardless of all the companies, if someone wants me to lie and cheat and say false things to promote their product, like, regardless of what that does to company A, their moral value set, what's your own, right? So I think you got to start there. That's the key in that decision. So
I don't want to feel like you're getting grilled here. So I'm going to ask you another question. That's probably another tough one.
But this is real stuff, though.
Yeah. So actually, and this stuff wasn't stuff we really talked about prior at all in our. But what do you say to somebody then who you're kind of like, at the upper level of 3-gun competitors, and again, like we said, it's not something that's elitist. You just got to look at how hard this guy works, right? Again, like we said, follow him, see how hard he works. That's why. What do you say then to people who, after you kind of say you want to make sure that companies that you work with align probably with your values a lot? Have you ever had it where, let's say, company A is selling a Whoozy Whatsy and company B is selling a similar Whoozy Whatsy? Oh gosh, I'm really making this difficult. Yeah, I think, jeez. Okay, let me rephrase this. Have you ever had it where people just start saying, you're more into the companies than the actual products? You're not running the best gear. You're just running the stuff from companies that you like?
Yeah, absolutely. So it certainly comes up, and I think that sponsored athletes, brand ambassadors can very easily get that, and some do. I mean, I won't say that nobody does this. Some people shoot stuff because it's given to them, not because it's what they would buy.
Or because they think the company's cool.
And I think that I don't think shooting a product because you think the company is cool is a bad thing, personally. If you really like the company, you dig their image, you dig what they do. For me personally, trying to be the best that I can possibly be, I'm going to go with what's the best product. Like, that's probably going to be my first bar. After that, it's the company and the relationship that I have. So I'm a big relationship guy. Most of my sponsors, I have had very few sponsors I've ever had for 1 year. So a big piece is like, they've got an interesting product that I'm interested in. I won't sign with anybody until I get a chance to use it, because if at first pass, like, I wouldn't use it, if I wouldn't buy it and I wouldn't pay money for it, I'm not going to promote it. It doesn't matter how much money you're going to give me or what's coming my way. I can't do this. I got a very recent example where a company want to send me an entire array of pistols. Like, hey, you're not going to shoot these in competition, but just lifestyle EDC stuff. Would you shoot these? Blah, blah, blah. They sent me 3 or 4 of them to demo, took them to the range, didn't like them. I said, I appreciate it. Sent them back. I said, I can't do it. I could have put $4,000 in pistols in my gun safe for free just to promote on a casual basis, but I wouldn't shoot these. I wouldn't shoot them. I wouldn't promote them, and I wouldn't be me and being honest with who I am and have the integrity that I believe that I have if I just took them because they were free guns and for the money. So that's a huge piece of it. So yeah, I think it's got to be stuff that you would use. But I do know people who take stuff just because it's free, and they'll brand and rep anybody because they're putting money or product in their pocket. And I think with that, I think the clear sign of that for me, looking at others in the industry, is just massive turnover of people they're repping all the time. Mm-hmm. I was with A, who had the same product, company A. Next, like 6 months later, I'm with company B, who was competitor, and then company C a year and a half later. And before you know it, they've gone through 5 pants sponsors for shooting pants or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. For me personally, almost all my sponsorship is year over year over year. I do very little change up. I very, very infrequently have gone from one person to a competitor within 1 year.
Yeah,
so
and actually to back what Josh is saying, Josh contacted me early on, and we actually didn't sponsor you right away, but you bought the product that you wanted to run, which for me, and learning a lot from like Mark on the sponsorship side of things. I mean, that's like a really good thing when somebody's like, oh, well, thanks for the opportunity. Even if they don't get the answer they want, but then they go and buy it. It's like, oh, okay, so they actually really do believe in us.
Yeah. Well, they believe in it, and that
they wouldn't just use it only because you just gave it to them.
Yeah, the conversation in the next SHOT Show was a lot better for Josh.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I had a 1-8 optic from a different company that I had also purchased. I looked through a Razor 1-6 and I was like, this is a better optic for this game. I want this optic. Contacted Ruben, and like I said, I purchased the optic and ran it for that year. Loved it, and then the relationship blossomed from there.
And that goes back into putting in the work and building your platform. Yep. And using products that you believe in, and that integrity, and and
your personal brand too.
Right.
I mean, right now, if a company is to sponsor Josh, he's pretty established in who he is. Like, that's what you're getting. Mm-hmm. And if they're on board with that, then it's a good fit. And then if they want him to change who he is, just knowing him, he's probably going to say, well, we're not really a fit because that's not what I'm about. So
I wish I would have known that you only had 9 fingers at first.
Yeah, that you should have put that on the resume.
That's right.
But
that's back to road racing days.
Didn't know
so
that.
You're saying you're like fingerist or something?
Fingerist. Hey man, it's bought and paid for.
A lot of hand dexterity in this sport,
I guess I said that on the podcast now, and we're not going to edit that out.
Take it back.
Stay. Jeez. But I wanted to ask some of those questions because I feel like these brand ambassadors. We've mentioned it before. I think sometimes a few folks can oftentimes ruin something or the way that something is perceived for a lot of other folks. But there are some kind of myths and things, or just points of view out there about brand ambassadors. They only run stuff that they get for free or whatever. And you know what? Maybe there are some people who are like that, and that's their deal. But
yeah, I know Ruben said in the Vortex program, one of the first questions, if not the question, he's going to ask you is, "Are you a customer? Did you buy your own Vortex product before you came and asked us for support?" Mm-hmm. So that goes a long way with a lot of companies, and certainly with us.
Yeah. So circling back to the selfish and unselfish aspect of this, I think that one thing you really got to ask yourself if you're looking to embark on this is, do you understand what it takes to do this job well? Because it's a job, man. I say job and I mean it. Like, to me, shooting is a job. I love it. It's a great hobby, but it's a job. Representing 13 companies, producing content, tagging them, supporting them, answering questions for potential customers, driving conversations on social media or in person to these companies is a lot of work. It's a ton of work. And I think I actually put that into the unselfish column because I think you've got to naturally want to do that even when you're not getting anything from that company. I can tell you I've promoted a lot of companies that I believed in before they ever gave me anything because I thought they were great products, right? So to me, that if you don't do that naturally, and that's not something that you think, you hear these words, you think like, yeah, I totally think I could do this and I would like doing it, then you probably shouldn't be going after, you're probably not going to be very successful, and you probably shouldn't put too much emphasis on that. And I believe that. I think that if you don't do this, if what I just named there and those 5 or 6 things doesn't kind of come naturally to you and sound like it's something you're going to do, you're not going to like this. It's going to be a lot more work. You're going to dread all the aspects of that to get, and the way this typically works too is it starts small, right? And the volume of work needs to still be there. It can't be like, well, I only got a little bit, so I'm only going to do a tiny, tiny little bit. You're trying to establish yourself. So you got to severely outperform, I think, to show your value. My goal at the end of every season with every company that I work for is that they emphatically want me back. I've provided so much value, 3, 4, 5, 6 times what I've received, that they feel like they'd be nuts not to want me back. And if I choose to leave, they're like, would you consider staying in some capacity? Like, is there anything we can still do together or whatever? So that's a goal of mine, is that I want to be underpaid and overproducing in this game.
And that's another big way to stand out.
It is. Yeah.
A big way to stand out.
And I try to ask for as little as possible as well. Just try to, because a lot of these companies are really small. So every additional, component, rifle, blah, 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 that's above and beyond, like, they're pulling that directly out of their pocket and what they're feeding their family with their little business, and they're giving it to you hoping you're going to generate more sales. So if you're going to reach into that bag and pull out another little piece for yourself, you better be putting 3 or 4 back in. Otherwise, they won't be here next year. And if you just run companies out of business because you're asking so much and they don't know better, I think you start to get that reputation as well. And I've seen that with other shooters, to where they'll go into this company enters the market, they're brand new, they don't know this game at all. They meet this person, they sign in, give them the world, the company goes under. Now, it may not be directly this person's fault, but I'm sure if they're not returning on that and they're not being honest about what they can really deliver, they're definitely contributing to that company not surviving. Mm-hmm. So I've seen that a couple of times too with some folks.
Rube, what I hear is that Josh is underpaid but overproducing, so we're basically like treating him like a slave or something.
I said I try to be.
We can talk. Let's talk off the air.
Yeah.
Take these
I have
shuffles
kind
out.
of like a last call.
Well, that's great, because you kind of got into it a little bit, but I was going to see too if there was any other things that are common misconceptions about being a brand ambassador that perhaps as Josh has sort of become one and been one for a little while, he was kind of like, wow, if anybody thought you actually did this, it's wrong. But you got into, I feel like a lot of it is just that a lot of people think that becoming a brand ambassador is just kind of like, I'm going to get free stuff. All I got to do is post some photos. People are going to like them, and it's great.
If you're not ready for a 20-hour-a-week part-time job, minimum in your life.
Well, and you got to stay in touch too. It's the other thing. I talk to people all the time that I find it amazing. It's like, so how often do you talk to the people you shoot for? Once, twice a year. I call everyone minimum every other month. Many it's several times a month. Mm-hmm. How are things going? How's business? Where do we need to be directing? Like, I look at myself as a marketing contractor. Mm-hmm. What are you guys focused on right now? Is it PCC? Is it AR-15s? Is it what particular optic? Like, really trying to push the Huey right now. Sweet, Huey's on my gun in the next match, right? I mean, that to me, that's what my job is.
Well, and that's amazing too. I mean, everybody's busy, right?
Yeah.
But it can be tough for the company sometimes to always be able to reach out. So for like a person like you to take that initiative, like I'm sure, Ruben, every time you get that phone call, it's a phone call you enjoy receiving, this, that, the other. It might not be a phone call that you get to think about making, at that sort of pace. I mean. And it goes both ways, right? It should be happening both ways, no doubt about it. But if 2 people are engaged, or if both sides are engaged, it's just going to make that way, way better.
I agree.
Ruby, you want to send this sucker into last calls?
Let's do some last calls.
Let's do it. Before I say anything else that sparks up more controversy, right? Is that what you're trying to do?
No, not at all. No.
Nervous laughter.
Yeah, Jim. I would say this: if you're gonna do the brand ambassador thing, whether it be for one company or 13, just know this, like, there's always going to be gear, whether you're doing lightweight hunting and you're really promoting that, backcountry hunting lifestyle, or you're a competitive shooter, or you're a BMX racer. It doesn't really matter. If you're in that life and you're living the brand ambassador thing, and I guess what I've found too, and I've done competitive shooting for a while, not as long as some, but sometimes you just have to buy some gear too. It kind of goes back to what Jimmy was saying with do you ever have companies that don't necessarily have the same views. Like, even if you're, like Josh said, like he makes a lot of his decisions based on, what's the best gear and do our values align. Sometimes you may just have to go out there and buy that piece of gear. You don't have to represent every company of every piece of gear you use.
Yeah,
That's a great point.
Just use some gear sometimes. You might have to pay for it.
Yep.
yeah. As much as it'd be nice to get those roll pins for free and
Right,
wear the
yeah.
logo on your jersey, you
Man.
might just have to buy them.
I tell people a lot, the cheapest whatever, the cheapest gun, the cheapest scope, the cheapest whatever you're ever going to buy is the one you go to the store and pay full retail for.
Yep.
True that.
Yeah, you're talking about if you were to have that sponsored to you or given to you, you got a lot.
You got
of work.
you got some sweat equity that you owe.
You got some.
Yep.
Yeah, I see. That's an interesting point of view, but it makes sense. Rube, you started last calls and you're directly in the middle of the table, so it's hard to tell which way to go.
Josh is next.
Well, what is this like
That's
what is this like a wheel with lug nuts? We're going star pattern or something?
I thought Adam just said
Adam
his.
just do a start. His
I got
Hey,
I got
man.
one that I actually wanted
I guess
to do.
you just okay. All right.
Is this the one now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so my last call is I'm going to say this because Josh is too humble to say it about himself. If you're interested in what we're talking about and you haven't, you should go over and check out Josh's Instagram and his Facebook because he is one of the most. He's an innovator in our time in the sport. He is one of the few people who really brought a high level of athleticism to shooting instead of shooting skills and became an athlete. So he really brought it at an innovative spin to the sport. So if you're interested in what we're talking about, you should really check out what he's putting out on the social because it's some pretty interesting stuff, and he has a lot to share that could be useful to you.
Wow. Thank you, Adam.
It's a good one.
Yeah. I guess sticking with for my last call comment, sticking with the sponsored shooter thing, I think don't confuse the enjoyment of the sport and success in the sport with being sponsored. The two are not mutually exclusive. This is a wonderful game. There's no reason to think that you somehow cannot achieve a high level in this game without sponsorship. If it's not for you, if it's not your personality, you can do everything with this game that you want without it. It's not the keys to the kingdom to success. Go out and shoot, differentiate yourself. If that's your goal, you need to go out and build a skill set and need to find a way to stand out. Because there are so many of us now that are doing this. If you want to pursue that sponsorship side, you've got to be different. You got to find a way to create your own brand and to be individual. And if you don't want to do that and you just want to go shoot, then go and shoot and love the game for what it is. That's my last piece.
I like it. All right, my last call.
You're gonna make me go last?
I don't. You want me
Circle, round the circle.
around the circle?
Round the circle.
It's not lug nuts, Mark.
I thought we were doing
All
lug
right.
nuts.
So, all right, my last call is this one podcast episode isn't gonna be the silver bullet to kill all the misconceptions out there about companies and brand ambassadors and their relationships and things like that. I think, I had a really good thing I was going to say. My mind wandered. I think some of the stuff I guess that I was asking Josh or that was brought up here, by the other folks, it might elicit some feelings where you hear the answer or you hear the question, you think, got him. I feel like there's a big culture of, ooh, got him, trying to catch people in the act of doing something that they don't agree with or whatever. And the brand ambassador company relationship seems to be a big kind of hot button for that kind of for that kind of a feeling or a searching that people do. And so I guess for lack of a better term, we're just trying to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit here to show what a relationship between, because obviously, it's the Vortex Nation podcast. We try not to be super in your face about how it's Vortex, but obviously this is Vortex, and we're talking to somebody that we do sponsor here, And so this is an example of what that's like, A lot of the stuff that we brought up, Josh talked about, that we talked about, we didn't rehearse it, ahead of time. And then another thing that I'll say too is that sometimes I think some people think that a company only pays attention or places a higher value on brand ambassadors rather than just the average customer. And I guess that, yes, there's more of an investment, I guess, as far as, you send them some products, they use those products, they promote those products. But as far as like, if Josh gave us a call, or if you listening right now gave us a call, we'd pick up the phone and we'd talk to Josh probably a lot like we talk to you, And as we've mentioned here, Josh puts in a lot of sweat equity, and he does a ton of work, and he built up the platform. He did a lot of stuff probably on his own, and he decided that this was going to be the lifestyle for him. And so that's kind of how that relationship ended up getting started. But it doesn't mean that, and of course, all I can do is speak for Vortex right now, but I know that it's the same way for other companies out there. I just can't name them off the top of my head, or I'd be missing somebody if I did name a few. But it's not that these brand ambassadors are loved more. It's not like we have favorite children. Not that you're children.
You can get a hold of me and Ruben the same way that Josh does.
Yeah.
We're on Instagram.
Exactly.
That's right.
So anyway, what I'm getting at is just basically that just sometimes when people get kind of hush-hush about brand ambassadors and sort of like, oh, I don't want to talk about it too much, or, oh, I'm worried that all these people are going to start all of a sudden emailing me about becoming a brand ambassador, or they'll feel like they can trap me into, oh, well, you did this for so-and-so, so you should do it for me too, and then you have to go into the conversation of, well, this person did that, there's all that crud out there, and I guess this was just to kind of talk a little bit about what actually happens, and, yeah. That was a really scrambled last call.
No, that was
but
good though,
hopefully
Jim.
got a
I mean, you
point across.
definitely,
My
like,
point
definitely,
across.
that was good. I mean, like, yeah, we do have some brand ambassadors, but I think every one of our customers is a brand ambassador, and like,
Right.
I think there's a little bit of differentiation because, like, sometimes with brand ambassadors, you're kind of saying that they kind of speak on our behalf in their area of expertise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no reason to hide that you
No,
have brand
not at
ambassadors.
all.
So
No.
we do.
We
It's out there.
celebrate it.
We're marketing contractors. That's
Yeah.
what we are.
Yep.
Right? We really are. We work on behalf of Vortex for Vortex's needs to serve the company for the customers.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
And if you're not a person who dials a 1-800 number, you have a question, you can talk to our brand ambassadors too.
Do it
Good
all the
point.
time.
That's
All the
that's
time.
why they're out there.
Great point. All right. Like I said, if anybody just had a really, maybe I can draw a map later and we can post it to explain what my last call was. But
A paint by numbers, if you will.
Spiderweb
Yeah.
map. Spiderweb map.
all right, Mark, you're last.
Man, I loved what Josh said when he said, you don't, if you are into the shooting sports, being a sponsored shooter doesn't need to define your success in that arena. And I'll follow that with, if you are looking to go down that path of being a sponsored shooter or a brand ambassador in the shooting sports, listen to this podcast or talk to Josh personally, because I think his philosophy about the way he goes about that is a pretty darn good roadmap.
Yep.
Yeah. Fantastic. And you can talk to him about that controversy that we're probably going to cut out too.
I don't think we should cut it out.
All righty. Thanks again, Josh, for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thanks again to everybody also for listening. And like we said, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, definitely hit us up. In that case, happy hunting and shooting, everybody. We'll end it with a classic bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hit that subscribe button so you can always stay up to date on the latest happenings over here at the Vortex Nation podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. Again, everybody, thanks, and happy hunting and shooting. We appreciate it. Have a good one.